Now comes the part where you gotta be a little more careful. You gotta know what you're doing a little bit here. And that is to remove, number one, you gotta remove the floats. And what that is it's a little teeny tiny pin. If you look right here, little round thing. Goes all the way through. Depending upon the model of carburetor, sometimes it has a fatter head on one end and a smaller head on the other. This one looks like it's just straight though. But you need to find something to push that out with. Okay, so I went and got my scratch awl. It's just that one of those pointy tools you use to poke holes in drywall or whatever. I'm gonna get it on here and just give it a little push. And if it doesn't move easily, be careful. Push a little bit harder. Sometimes they get stuck. Sometimes they get so stuck that if you end up hitting them with a pin and a hammer, you'll actually break one of these off. And then you're up a creek, because now you gotta buy a whole new carb to get this carb body. Now I'm not really squeezing hard with the dikes. I'm using these diagonal side cutters just because I want it to grip, but I don't want to scar this up, so I'm not pulling on it real hard. And you'll see that here, watch this. Okay, so I got that pin out. I'm going to pull that pin in real close to the camera so you can see. See, I made a little tiny divot in it. Let me see if I can get the focus again. Little tiny divot, but that's going to be where it meets up with the aluminum. And it's very, very superficial. They use pretty hard steel for that particular piece because of that. So, now that pin's out, we can remove our float. And we can actually set it in the carburetor bowl that has some carb cleaner in it. And we can let it soak a little bit too. It's not going to hurt it at all to soak some. Now, see if I can get this in frame. The next thing to pull out and check. Ooh, that sucker's real stuck on this one. That is your float needle. And it is real gummy and sticky on this guy. So I'm going to go ahead and drop it in that same bucket in the carb bowl and let it soak a little bit. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to take that carb cleaner spray. It's got that little red nozzle on it that comes with every single one of these. I'm going to stick it down inside this hole. This is the fuel line inlet. If everything's okay, it should squirt out the top, which is actually the bottom. So that tells me that we're fine. We don't have any major blockages in here. It's just a little bit of gummy goo, nasty stuff. But, alright, next step is going to be to remove the jets. So you have this particular carb. Usually you have two pieces. You have your pilot jet and your main jet. Sometimes they're offset like this. Sometimes they're in front of each other, one way or the other. But the bigger one's always your main jet. The smaller one's always your pilot. The pilot is what works mainly when it's at idle. The main jet is what you use when it's at full throttle. So, if you have specific areas where your bike is running poorly, that's what you can use to diagnose it, is if it's your main jet, your pilot jet. If you need to change your jetting, say for elevation, or if you've done some other mods to the bike, like if you did an exhaust, something like that, you usually need to go up a little bit bigger on the pilot and the main. Sometimes just the main, sometimes just the pilot. Kind of depends on what application you're running and what kind of mods you made, but quite often you need to up the main all the time almost, unless it's a bone stock bike. Alright, so I'm going to go grab a screwdriver and show you how to remove these. Okay, so sometimes your main jet here has a hex on it that you can use to pull it off with. This one has a hex up here. Up here, there's a hex, but it's like a 6mm hex, and it's for the emulsion tube. I'll explain that when I get it out. But you want to get the the jet and the emulsion tube separated to clean them out. Also, you have your pilot jet down here is usually almost always just slotted. It's usually not got a hex or anything like that. Usually just slotted. Now, here's something I want to really hammer in. Get in here nice and close. The number one issue that causes damage to your parts is improper fitting screwdrivers. Okay? If you're doing these jets are made of brass. Okay? These pieces are made of brass. If you are using a screwdriver that does not fit correctly, you will damage them. This one, see if I can get it to focus, there it is a little bit damaged. It's a little bit beat up because somebody used the wrong size screwdriver on it at some point. It's not damaged enough that it's not going to work. I mean, as long as you can still get it out, it'll be okay. But if you use the wrong size screwdriver a couple of times, you're going to really damage these. So I actually had to find two separate size screwdriver tips, one for the pilot and one for the main, in order to get it to fit well. So let me see if I can get these apart. There we go. See that? See how the hex isn't turning, but the bell, the cup is? Okay, so I'm going to set this down. I'm using the screwdriver to hold it in place in this little cup until I'm ready to handle it. Come on, come out of there. Okay, so this is just a cup that keeps the fuel from sloshing. Okay, it's kind of like a baffle. We're gonna go ahead and drop it in our mixture of carburetor cleaner and goo. This is your main jet. Now, see if I can focus. There we go. Okay, so you can see that little tiny hole in there. Because this is an 80cc bike, it's got a really small main jet. If I can find the number on here, there it is. Sometimes they're really hard to read. Let's see if I can get this to show up in the camera. Probably not. But on the side of it here, it says there's a star, which means it's for a Kaihin, however you want to pronounce that, and a 95. So that means it is 0.95 millimeter hole in this thing. Get to focus again. There we go. You can get to focus just right. You can see the little hole in there. Now that's something we're going to want to clean. You want to take something that's softer than the brass, ideally, and clean that. If it's the main jet, you can usually get away with your can of carb cleaner. You stick the nozzle in it, and you just hold it. Working properly, if it's somewhat clear, it'll shoot out the other side. You put it into that, so that should actually fit inside the nozzle on the back side. So you have the threaded side. Come on, focus. You have the thread side and the non-threaded side, and the nozzle should fit into the threaded side. Or at least try to fit into the threaded side. Some of it's going to spray back at you because it's going through a really tiny hole. But that one's good. Alright, now let me switch my screwdriver tips to the proper fitting tip for the pilot jet. Nothing pisses me off more than tearing apart a carburetor and finding that the jets are all jacked up from somebody using the wrong size screwdriver. If you're using the right size screwdriver, it'll come out easier. It won't fight you at all. It'll be a lot better to work on. Okay, so here is our pilot jet. Now, it'll have an itty bitty hole in it. I mean, like tiny. Probably wouldn't be able to see it, no matter how I get the camera to focus. It probably won't show up on there. And then it has these little tiny holes on the sides, at the top. This is the top. This is the part that goes into the carburetor. see those little holes? Yeah, there you go. So it has a hole in the bottom that goes all the way through. I mean, it'll go all the way through. It'll get bigger once it's on this side, and then it has those little tiny holes. So what I'm going to do is see if I can't find some way to spray carb cleaner through this. Okay, it actually comes out the other side, so that's a good sign. If it didn't, then what I would do is I would take some audio speaker wire, okay? Some audio speaker cable wire, and I'd strip it, and I'd pull just one strand, you know, it's that twisted copper wire, and I'd take just one little tiny strand of it and stretch it out, and I would use it to poke through all these little holes, and all the way through here. So you poke all the way through there, poke all the way through all these little tiny holes, and it would be nice and clean. See, this one's actually, you can see it, okay? You see a little star? That's for Keihin. It's kind of a K-shaped star. And then, if I get to focus again, 35. So it's Keihin 35 Pilot. So 35 Pilot, 95 main. Now, for the next fun thing we're going to try and get to here. The emulsion tube. Now, I mentioned this before. If you're lucky, it is actually a 7mm on this particular bike. Again, this is just a brass part. It should not be too tight in there. If it is, somebody really messed it up. Okay. This piece is known as your emulsion tube. It has those little tiny pinholes on the sides, big fat hole in the top, and a big hole that goes all the way through. It's not real complicated. You got to make sure that it's clean, and especially that it's clean through those little tiny pinholes. So what I'm going to do is show you the easy way to do that. Stick your carb cleaner on one end, plug it off with your thumb on the other end. Now if I squeeze it, it should spray every direction. Beautiful. So that means our emulsion tube is okay. So it really looks like the main culprit on this bike was just some dirty gas. Now I'm going to take the carb body here, and I'm just going to hose it off real quick a little bit, lightly, with some of this carb cleaner. And especially you want to get into the jets. Now, if I go into the jet hole here, it should spray out on the inside. Yep, okay. And it should spray out on the inside again with the main, or you should be able to see through the main jet hole. If I get focused right, you should be able to see through it. Maybe not. You should be able to see light through it. If I can get the camera to focus on it. I can't get the camera to focus on it. I can see light through it by eye, but surefire way to check it is if it squirts out the inside, then you're good. Okay, so now it's just a matter of putting it all back together in reverse order.